On the 7th of July, 2024, a 50-year-old man from San Angelo, Texas, finished the hardest part of the Bright Angel Trail. He had spent the night at Havasupai Gardens, 4.5 miles down and 3,800 feet below the rim. In the morning, he started climbing back out. He made it. He climbed all 4,460 feet. He got within 100 feet of the trailhead, close enough that people standing at the rim could probably see him, and then he collapsed. Bystanders started CPR. Rangers responded from the rim within minutes. None of it worked. The trail didn't get him. The trail was basically over. He had already beaten it, or so it looked, and it killed him anyway, 100 feet from the finish. Bright Angel Trail drops 4,460 feet over 7.5 miles, from the South Rim down to the Colorado River. The National Park Service's own signage tells you in capital letters not to attempt the rim-to-river round trip in a single day. He hadn't even tried that. He had simply spent one night down there and climbed back out the way thousands of people do every season. And it still wasn't enough. That's not a freak accident. That's Tuesday at the Grand Canyon. This channel exists to explain why places like this keep killing the same kind of person in the same kind of way, using the actual record, not ghost stories, not guesswork. Subscribe if you want the real mechanism, not the myth. By the end of this, you'll know what actually kills people on this trail, and it is almost never the thing they were afraid of when they started walking down. Grand Canyon National Park sees somewhere around 12 to 15 deaths a year. Some years it's worse. In 2024, 16 people died, and the co-author of the definitive book on canyon deaths called that number an anomaly, not a new normal. Over the long run, researchers who track this independently, because the park itself does not publish a running death count, have recorded roughly 700 deaths in the canyon since 1869, with about 550 of them below the rim. Now put that next to the visitor number. Grand Canyon had 4.4 million recreation visits in 2025. 4.9 million the year before. Roughly 4 million people moved through the park between April and September alone, which is exactly the window when the inner canyon turns lethal. A dozen or so deaths against 4 million visits looks, on paper, almost reassuring. Long odds, rare event. That's the story most people tell themselves at the trailhead. Here's what the rare event story leaves out. The park's search and rescue team responds to roughly 300 incidents a year, on top of another 530 hiker assists. People who needed help but didn't quite become a full rescue. That's not an edge case. In one especially bad month, rangers logged 216 hiker assists, 51 search and rescue incidents, and 37 helicopter evacuations in the inner canyon. Grand Canyon runs more search and rescue operations than almost any other park in the entire national system. One recent year's tally, 290 operations, worked out to roughly 10% of every search and rescue call logged across the entire national park system that year. It costs close to $1 million a year at its worst, and nationally, the Park Service spends nearly $5 million annually pulling people out of trouble. Rare times 4 million is not actually rare. It's a quiet, dependable certainty. In the single worst summer on record, before anyone had built a system to manage it, this park logged 482 search and rescue calls and 5 heat deaths in one season on 65 separate days above 95 degrees. Somewhere on this trail, right now, that same math is running. Here's the part that should bother you. This isn't a trail that looks dangerous. It's a trail that's been engineered to feel safe. Bright Angel starts in Grand Canyon Village, a few steps from a historic lodge and a mule corral. The National Park Service calls it a maintained dirt trail, wide, well-defined, patrolled. There are rest houses with water, toilets, and emergency phones at intervals on the way down, 1.5 miles in, 3 miles in, 4.5 miles in at Havasupai Gardens. Mule trains use it daily. A ranger who worked this park for years described the effect a nearly identical setup used to have at a neighboring trailhead. People would drive up, walk to the edge, look down, and get pulled right in, he said, before that trailhead was deliberately made harder to reach. Nothing about the first mile of Bright Angel says wilderness. It says sidewalk with a view, and the descent agrees with you. You start at 6,800 feet, where a June morning can sit in the 60s, cool enough for a jacket. You drop effortlessly, losing over 3,000 feet of elevation in the first 4.5 miles. Your legs are fresh. Your water is full. Nothing hurts yet. Your brain, quite reasonably, concludes this is fine. It is not fine. It's alone. You are spending elevation you will have to buy back, on foot, later, in conditions you have not experienced yet, with a body that has already been working for hours. Sandia National Laboratories, which studies canyon hikers directly, has a clean way of putting it. The Grand Canyon is an inverse challenge. The first half is easier than the second. On most hard mountains, if you get tired, you turn around and walk downhill to safety. Here, downhill is the trailhead you already left. There is no easy way out. There is only up. Call it the upside-down mountain. It lets you spend everything while you feel great, and it doesn't present the bill until you're the most exhausted, the most dehydrated, and the least able to pay it. Every feature that makes this trail feel safe on the way in, the water stations, the mule trains, the lodge at the top, is a feature that puts distance between you and help on the way out. Keep that shape in your head. It's going to explain almost everything that follows. Now here's the thing. Ask 100 people at the South Rim what's most likely to kill them down there, and most will point at the edge. The 4,000-foot drop. The unfenced overlook. The fall. That's the assumed killer. It is almost never the real one. A retired National Park Service search and rescue chief who ran operations at Grand Canyon put it about as plainly as an official ever will. Flash floods and cliff jumps, he said, are the outliers. Heat is by far the single biggest risk. Cardiac events come second. Not falling, not wildlife. Heat, and your own heart on the climb back out. Here's what almost nobody accounts for. Heat stroke isn't discomfort that eventually becomes dangerous. It's a cascading systems failure with a clock attached. Your muscles generate heat faster than a 100+ degree canyon can absorb it, so your body reroutes blood to your skin to shed that heat, as much as 8 liters a minute, redirected from your gut and your kidneys to your surface. That works, for a while. It buys cooling at the cost of everything else. Once your core temperature crosses about 40 degrees Celsius, your brain stops regulating properly. Confusion sets in, then collapse. Then a cascade. Muscle breakdown, clotting failures, liver and kidney injury, stacking on top of each other in a matter of hours. The treatment window is brutal. To have a real chance, your core temperature needs to come back down below 39 degrees within 30 minutes of onset. Left untreated, exertional heat stroke can kill more than half the people it hits. 30 minutes on a trail where rangers are a radio call and a mile of switchbacks away. That should bother you. It's the whole video, really, compressed into one number. There isn't a single official document that ranks every cause of death on this specific trail. The park doesn't publish deaths broken down by trail or even a running total for the whole canyon. What follows is built from individual incident reports, from the park's own medical studies, and from the people who actually run rescue operations here, which is about as close to ground truth as this subject gets. Grand Canyon's own emergency medical service logged 474 non-fatal and 6 fatal heat-related illness cases over a 6-year study period. 90% of those people were hiking. 40% needed a helicopter to get out. And the worst month wasn't July. It was May, before most visitors even think to take the heat seriously. Heat contributed to 82 search and rescue calls in a single recent year, most of them clustered in early summer, exactly when the canyon still looks deceptively mild from the rim. The reason it's underestimated is built into the geography. You start cool. You descend into heat gradually enough that your body never gets one clear alarm signal. Just a slow accumulation you don't register as danger until you turn around and the return trip demands everything you no longer have. Here's the thing almost nobody expects. The second biggest killer isn't heat exhaustion at all. It's your heart. Grand Canyon's park physician, 34 years on the job, has said it about as directly as a doctor can. You do not want the Grand Canyon to be the stress test that reveals you have heart disease. In the same study, roughly a fifth of non-fatal heat illness patients had a known cardiovascular condition, and close to 40% were on prescription medication for one. One hiker found dead on the trail in June of 2024 had an autopsy later showed a 90% blockage in one artery. He likely never knew. The mechanism is simple and unforgiving. Climbing 4,500 vertical feet is already a serious cardiac workload. Do it in heat, and your heart has to supply both your working legs and a skin surface dilated wide open for cooling. At the same time, your blood volume is dropping from sweat loss. That's a sustained, compounding demand on a heart that may be carrying damage nobody has diagnosed yet. The park physician has also pointed out that both the heat and the altitude here don't just add stress on their own, they actively worsen whatever medical condition you were already carrying, whether you knew about it or not. There's no dramatic scene here. No cliff, no animal. Just tired, and then not breathing. And a family that finds out for the first time what their heart was actually capable of. Remember the man from the cold open, the one who made it within 100 feet of the trailhead. His cause of death was never released. What we do know is that he had just finished the exact climb this mechanism describes. The one that turns an undiagnosed heart problem into a fatal one, often at the very moment the exertion finally stops. Here's what the data does next, and it's the reversal that makes this trail genuinely strange. 19% of non-fatal heat incidents at Grand Canyon are suspected hyponatremia. That's not dehydration. That's the opposite. It's drinking too much plain water, fast enough to wash the sodium out of your blood before your body can replace it. In one Grand Canyon case series, 7 hikers showed clinically significant hyponatremia, with 3 of them having full seizures and 2 more showing other major neurological symptoms. An earlier case series out of this same park documented 4 hikers with symptomatic hyponatremia, the first such cases ever reported in recreational hikers anywhere in the world, in a wilderness setting rather than a marathon or a triathlon. It happened here first. The mechanism is almost elegant in a grim way. Sweat carries out water and salt together. Replace only the water and your remaining blood sodium gets diluted. Water then moves, by simple osmosis, into your brain cells, and your brain swells inside a skull that doesn't expand. Left untreated, that can put you in a coma within hours. It looks like heat exhaustion from the outside, someone confused, someone struggling. But it isn't heat at all, and treating it like heat can make it worse. You can walk into this one by doing exactly what every safety sign tells you to do. Drink more water. That's the trap. The Canyon's own clinic now keeps hypertonic IV fluids on hand specifically because of cases like this. It is the one way to die here by following the advice too closely. The falls come next, and they're almost always misread. Across the whole canyon, researchers have documented 125 fatal falls, 64 of them from the rim itself, 61 not from the rim at all but within the canyon. On trails like this one. On Bright Angel, the pattern in the record is falls that follow a medical event rather than cause one. Someone disoriented from heat or from a plunging sodium level stumbles off a section of exposed shelf trail, and the fall becomes the cause of death on paper, even though it was really the last link in a chain that started somewhere else. The trail itself isn't technical. It's wide, packed dirt, walked daily by mule trains. What makes it dangerous is never the footing. It's whatever already went wrong in the hiker's body before their feet did. Visitors tend to overrate this one precisely because it's the only mechanism you can actually picture, a body going over an edge. The ones you can't picture are doing most of the killing. Then there's the assumption that cold weather solves all of this. It doesn't. On the 17th of February 2023, with park high temperatures sitting in the upper 40s, a 56-year-old man from Wisconsin set out to hike from the rim to the Colorado River and back in a single day. The same rim-to-river attempt the park explicitly tells people not to make. Below Havasupai Gardens, he became unresponsive. Friends and bystanders performed CPR. Rangers arrived with a defibrillator within half an hour. It didn't bring him back. No heat warning that day. No triple-digit temperature. Just 4,460 vertical feet of trail in February and a body that couldn't finish the climb. That's the whole thesis in one incident. Take heat completely off the table and the trail still kills, because the real hazard was never the temperature. It was the exertion. Ice does add a slip hazard on the upper switchbacks in winter, which the park does warn about, but the climb itself doesn't care what season it is. 4,460 feet up is 4,460 feet up in July or in February. Flash floods and rockfall round out the list, and honestly, they're overrated here. Garden Creek has flooded and closed sections of this trail before, with no injuries recorded. The genuinely deadly floods people half remember happened in Havasu Canyon on the Havasupai Reservation. A real place, a real danger, and not this trail. Don't let the two blur together. On Bright Angel, weather closes the trail. It doesn't appear to be killing anyone. If you've ever pushed past a point where you knew you should turn around because you'd already come this far, tell me in the comments. And if this is making you rethink a hike you've got planned, a like helps this channel keep doing the research. Because the part most people get wrong isn't the heat or the falls or even the hiking itself. It's what's happening in their own head while it's happening. That's still coming. These causes don't sit side by side. They stack. That's the compounding, and it's the real shape of the upside-down mountain. Heat doesn't just hurt you on its own, it strips the cardiac reserve you didn't know was thin. Dehydration pushes you toward drinking more water, which can tip you into the very hyponatremia that mimics the heat illness you were trying to avoid. Disorientation from either one puts you on an exposed shelf trail, the narrow stretch below Havasupai Gardens, cut into rock hundreds of millions of years old, where the path runs high above a creek bed, that you'd have crossed safely an hour earlier. None of these mechanisms need to be dramatic on their own. Stacked together, over 4,460 vertical feet, an ordinary mistake, starting an hour late, skimping on salt, ignoring one wave of dizziness, stops being ordinary. It becomes the difference between a hard hike and a body on the trail. The trail doesn't need to throw one big danger at you. It only needs to slowly remove your margin for error, one mechanism at a time, until an unremarkable slip-up does the work that used to require a genuine crisis. That's the upside-down mountain again, just seen from the inside of your own body instead of from the rim. Here's what almost nobody accounts for about their own mind in that moment. Every other hard climb in the world lets you bail when you're exhausted. You turn around and downhill does the work for you. A researcher who studies canyon hikers described it exactly. On most mountains, if you're tired, you head down. Here, it's very easy to underestimate just how hard the way out actually is, because there is no easy way out. The instinct that keeps hikers alive everywhere else, I'm tired, I'll go down, is the instinct that gets people killed on this trail, because down is the direction they already used. And your judgment doesn't hold up long enough to catch the problem in time. Rangers are told to watch hiking companions for confusion, fainting, or altered mental state, because those are the early signs of heat stroke. And the person whose brain is overheating is, almost by definition, the person least equipped to notice it happening to them. There's a research project running right now at this exact trail using wearable devices and cognitive testing on rim-to-rim hikers, trying to find a marker, a change in reaction time, in memory, in decision-making that shows up before the medical emergency does. The scientists leading it describe the goal plainly, finding a pattern that precedes a serious event like hyponatremia before the hiker themselves would ever notice anything wrong. That project exists because by the time you feel wrong, you may already be past the point where you trust your own judgment to fix it. Here's the number that should really land. In one summer alone, rangers on this exact program made contact with 117,267 hikers and needed to deliver a corrective safety message to 28,478 of them. 24%. Across 5 recent years combined, that program logged nearly 460,000 contacts and had to hand out a preventive warning at close to a third of them. The ranger in charge of that program said calling it 25 to 30% unprepared was, if anything, generous. This isn't a trail where a small, careless minority gets in trouble. Being underprepared here is closer to the median experience than the exception. There is a physical threshold behind all of it, and it's been measured. Below 95 degrees Fahrenheit at the trail's midpoint, roughly 6 hikers per 1,000 need assistance. Cross 95 and that jumps to better than 10 per 1,000, a 71% increase, and not by coincidence. The single worst year on record for this trail had 65 days above that line. It also holds the record for search and rescue calls and for heat deaths. Your body has a switch. The canyon flips it every summer, on schedule. I keep coming back to this. The park itself tells you in writing to be ready to save yourself. Not as a suggestion, as policy. Because during peak summer, help may simply not arrive in time. Limited staffing, a backlog of calls, and helicopters that fly worse in the exact heat that's putting people on the ground in the first place. Consider the clock again. Heat stroke needs cooling within 30 minutes to give someone a real chance. Compare that to what actually happens on this trail. A call comes in, rangers respond, a helicopter launches, and rescuers still arrive to someone already gone. That's not a failure of effort. Ken Phillips, who ran this program for years, described what happens to the rescuers themselves. You run down the trail in the same heat that's killing the hiker, and after one call, you're spent for the rest of the day. Grand Canyon's emergency medical service handles well over 1,100 visitor cases a year. And in that same 6-year heat study, 40% of the heat illness patients needed a helicopter just to get out. The team that saves you is fighting the same canyon you are, over and over, all season. And there is no guarantee they're coming at all. A 1992 federal court ruling held that search and rescue at a national park is a discretionary function, not a legal duty. No statute requires anyone to save you. The decision of if, when, and how is left entirely to the rescue team on the ground that day. If it does work, an NPS helicopter costs you nothing directly. The Park Service pays for its own search and rescue out of its operating budget. A private one, brought in when the park's own aircraft can't respond, can run up to $15,000. But money was never really the point. The point is that the National Park Service also tells hikers directly that they need to be able to hike twice as long going up as they took coming down, a third of your time down, 2/3 back up, because the agency's own math assumes the return trip is where things go wrong. On a trail where the fatal window can be half an hour, the rescue system, however well run, however well funded, is built around a response time measured in much longer units than that. And it operates by law as a courtesy rather than a guarantee. The danger doesn't pause to let help catch up. It never has. So who actually ends up on that trail dying? Here's the part that should really bother you because it isn't who you'd guess. Across the park's own heat illness data, the majority weren't foreign tourists caught off guard by an unfamiliar climate. 84% were American, close to a third from Western states, people who, in theory, know what desert heat feels like. Median age, 43, with cases ranging from 11 years old to 83. Just over half of the non-fatal cases were women. There's no meaningful gender skew here. This happens to everyone. About a fifth had a known heart condition, and close to 40% of those patients were already on medication for it. In a separate study of 617 people attempting the rim-to-rim crossing, the median age was also 43, 65% were male, and nearly half had done this same crossing before, a median of 3 times. These are not first-timers stumbling in blind. Experience doesn't appear to protect you much here. The confirmed deaths on this specific trail in just the last few years range from 18 to 65 years old. No single group owns this trail's death toll. What they share isn't recklessness. It's a slight, ordinary overestimation of what their own body could still do on a hike the park explicitly warns against attempting in one day. Your heart, your hydration, your read on your own limits. Those are the actual variables here, not your gear, not your GPS, not your fitness app. The confirmed deaths on this trail span a 56-year-old from Wisconsin, a 50-year-old from Texas, and an 18-year-old on a day hike with his father. That should sit with you longer than any single incident does. The canyon isn't hunting anyone. That's almost worse. It doesn't need to be. It just keeps being exactly this hard, exactly this hot, exactly this far from help. And it lets you spend the easy half first every single time, season after season, for a dozen or more people every single year. The upside-down mountain doesn't trick you on purpose. It simply never bothers to warn you that the bill is coming because the bill always comes, whether or not you were paying attention on the way down. If I had to leave you with one number, it's the 30 minutes. That's how long you have, in the worst case, to get cooled down before heat stroke starts taking organs with it. And it's roughly the time it takes rangers just to reach some sections of this trail on foot, on the exact climb that also strains hearts nobody has screened. That gap is the whole video. Which one of these surprised you most? The water that can kill you, or the cardiac risk nobody screens for before they start climbing? Tell me below and tell me which place you think deserves this treatment next. This channel exists to find the real mechanism behind places like this one, using the record, not the rumor. Subscribe if that's the kind of thing you want more of.